To discuss that, we are joined now by Stephen White. Stephen is the executive director of the Catholic Project, leading the Catholic University of America's response to the clergy abuse crisis with a specific focus on the collaboration of clergy and the laity. He also served as executive producer for the award-winning podcast Crisis: Clergy Abuse in the Catholic Church. Stephen, thank you for being here. I first want to get your reaction to this shocking report from Ireland. Nearly 900 alleged sexual abusers at more than 300 schools between 1927 and 2013. It's devastating.
Yeah, it can become easy to get used to these kinds of stories. We've heard so many here in the United States. We've heard them in Ireland. We've heard them in Australia, in France, and in Germany, and around a lot of the world. I think it can become numbing to sort of keep receiving these waves and waves of abuse stories like this, where the scale is hard to imagine. I think it's important to keep in mind that we in the United States, in a lot of ways, are a couple decades ahead of where a lot of the rest of the global church is when it comes to dealing with this, and in a lot of ways being forced to deal with this, often against the church's desire. But a lot of the world is still playing catch up.
Yeah. And just this week, Stephen, major news out of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles as it pays $880 million to survivors of clergy sexual abuse dating back decades. And this is the result of a 2019 California law that removed the statute of limitations on child sexual abuse civil claims for a period of 3 years. Stephen, do you think should more states pass similar laws to bring about transparency and healing here?
I think most of the states that will pass those sorts of laws already have. I think the moment immediately following the summer of 2018 and into 2019 was a moment when that was the political window for those kinds of look back windows and those kinds of laws was right. And you've seen it in a lot of states. I mean, up and down the East Coast, New York, Maryland, California, obviously. This is actually the second massive settlement that the Archdiocese of Los Angeles has paid out. The previous one was almost $800 million. So this brings it to about $1.5 billion total that the Archdiocese of Los Angeles has paid out in settlements with abuse survivors.
And Stephen, as we're discussing these news headlines, we obviously cannot lose sight of the survivors themselves and their stories and what they are saying. In your work in responding to clerical sexual abuse, what are you hearing from survivors? What do they want the church to know?
Well, I can't speak for survivors. I can't speak for any one of them, or let alone all of them as a group. But many of the ones that I've spoken to have been some of the most edifying examples of people who have every reason to resent the church, to turn their back on the church, but who've been working very hard and very tirelessly to help the church heal from this, not just to bring healing to themselves and to other survivors, but to really help the church move forward in a way that's good for the whole church. That kind of a commitment to to the church, and the understanding that the church is something we all need, that the church is for those who are broken and for sinners and for everybody. Seeing that kind of commitment work coming from survivors has been incredibly edifying, even through some really sort of dark and unpleasant times for the church.
When it comes to the Archdiocese of Los Angeles and its settlement this week, most of the alleged acts of abuse took place more than 50 years ago. And I don't say that to belittle these cases, but to ask you, Stephen, what can you say about the Catholic Church's efforts to strengthen its protections against clerical abuse since then, since that time period? What protections are now in place?
Well, I already mentioned that we've had a lot of time in the United States, more than 2 decades now, since the Dallas Charter and the first major wave of the abuse crisis broke. We've had a lot of time in the United States to get better at this. We're not perfect by any stretch, but when it comes to reporting, mandatory reporting to civil authorities is something we do in the United States. Every diocese has a victims assistance coordinator whose job is to meet with those who come forward with allegations. That's required in every diocese. We audit all of those dioceses. On top of that, you've seen programs like this where you have dioceses working with representatives of survivors in order to work out massive, often, but just compensation packages that don't fulfill the debt of justice, but go a long ways towards doing that, while also leaving intact the church's ability to continue its ministry. So the church in the United States, in a lot of places, and we see this acutely in Los Angeles right now, is paying for sins that happened a long time ago. But that's incumbent upon us as Catholics we are a member of the church. We don't get to pick and choose which parts of that we're responsible for. And so helping to move towards healing is something that is important. And I think, there are a few places in the country today that are safer for children than the Catholic Church. And it's my hope that the rest of the world can learn from our mistakes, but also learn from what we've gotten right in the last 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stephen, the group that you lead, the Catholic Project, it focuses on the collaboration of the clergy and the laity in responding to the clerical sexual abuse crisis. So what should that collaboration look like? Is there anything our lay Catholic viewers, for example, can do to advance this collaboration?
Yeah, well, I think it begins with avoiding the kind of animosity that makes this about sort of laity versus clergy. Lay people need our priests. We need our bishops. We ought to want them to be better at their jobs. And if they're going to be better at their jobs, not just with regard to the abuse crisis, but with regard to a lot of aspects of life in the church, they need the help and the support of the laity. So trying to address challenges like the abuse crisis through the lens of collaboration, through the lens of we're all in this together. We all have some kind of responsibility for the mission of the church by virtue of our baptism. How can we address those challenges in a way that builds on those strengths and that kind of collaboration rather than sort of adds to division in the church?
And I just have 1 minute left with you, Stephen, but is there any specific action you would like to see the Vatican take to improve the church's response to clerical sexual abuse?
Well, I think the Vatican in the last couple of years has taken some significant steps, at least on paper. I think one of the things that remains to be done is for there to be a sort of greater transparency in what steps are being taken in particular cases, and a more sort of even-handed and regular application of the law that the church does have. When the church applies the law in a way that seems uneven or selective, that undermines confidence. I think to restore confidence, we need transparency, and we need a more even-handed approach to the application of the laws we already have.
Well, Stephen, I thank you for your work in the church and for taking the time to speak with us today. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.